here's my first 5 years is survive the tornado, survive the snake bite, survive the car getting shot through with anti-aircraft ammunition, survive buildings around me being bombed, and then just when I thought, okay, nothing else bad can happen, got run over by a car, both legs. You're for sure the first Iranian they've ever met in their life. So how you behave reflects on how these people will perceive foreigners and Iranians in their life and what they think of us. So you better always be on your best behavior.
The battle of a leader is to be eternally optimistic, and everything isn't always eternally optimistic.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
In a very unhealthy way. It sounds cliche, but it's like you're never gonna stop learning. And so just have humility about where you are. Don't let people get into your head, and don't drink your own Kool-Aid, because you're never gonna stop learning, particularly, in your professional life or in your personal life.
Thank you guys so much for joining us again for another episode of Unlinear, where we track the unlinear path of our guests and probably delve in to some current events and topics. Today, we have the good pleasure of sitting here with Maz Moini, who is the co-founder and CEO of Nova Risk, which is a property casualty insurance company. Maz, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
All right, then. So I think, I want to delve right in. So from my experience as a young, my parents are Caribbean. So my experience as a young Caribbean guy is you go to school, you get a good job, you get a good wife, and then those are your chances, especially as the immigrant journey. Going to college wasn't a maybe, it was an absolute. Good grades wasn't a maybe, it was an absolute, even though maybe not everybody had done it or other people had done it. This is just what the immigrant journey was. We got here, let's make it work. I personally find that most immigrants have something similar in their upbringing, in the pressure of being a young person, which I don't know that people understand if they're not from that. What was it like for you? Because you came here older, or were you born back home? Because you're born back home and then come here later, correct?
I was born back home. Back home being Iran.
Yep.
And then I moved to Italy when I was a kid, when I was very young, around 5-6 years. And then I came to Canada when I was in high school. So by the time I got here, I was a teenager.
Okay.
And basically had to learn 2 completely different languages from zero. So initially, when I moved to Italy, spoke absolutely no Italian. So I had to learn to speak Italian, did my schooling there. And then when I came to Canada as a teenager, didn't know the culture, didn't speak the language. Luckily there's the ESL system here in Canada. So I went through that and picked up the language. But it was a couple of years that was actually pretty rough, because particularly as a teenager, not being able to communicate with anybody, it's tough. Like being a teen is tough enough as it is, never mind having to communicate, right? But again, like I said, luckily, Canada's got good support systems for that.
Yep.
But yeah, when I got here, when I was a teenager, it was what you get preached by your parents remains unchanged no matter where you are. So to your point, in the family that I grew up in particular, and probably true of Iranian families in general, getting a graduate degree is non-negotiable, right? That's just, never mind undergrad. You're going to do that, then you're going to do a graduate degree, then you're going to go and get a good job. And good jobs typically fall within one of like 4 or 5 categories that I'm sure you can name.
My dad wanted me to be an engineer.
Yeah, there you go, right? Engineer, lawyer, doctor, the good old favorites, right? Yeah. And so I did that. And then, one of the things that sort of I get asked about is what drives you? And I'm not sure I've figured out the answer to that.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's any one thing, but one thing that I have been able to put my finger on is one of the things that my parents drilled into me was, you need to understand that we're done moving. This is it. We're staying in Canada. And you're the first generation of the rest of the line of our family in this country. So what you do sets up or doesn't set up everybody that comes after you for success. So
they
remember
had that conversation with you?
Oh yeah, all along.
How old are you when because that's essentially a passing of the mantle. Hey, it's on you.
Yeah.
How old are you when you have that moment?
Well, it even started before we got to Canada when we went to Italy. Because when we went to Italy, they sat me down. I was only like 5 or 6 years old then. And I said, hey, we're going to Italy.
Yeah.
This is in the early 80s.
Okay.
And they're like, we're going to Italy. Not only are we going to Italy, but we're not going to like Rome or Milan. We're going to a small town. You're the first foreigner these people have likely ever met in their entire life. Yeah. And you're for sure the first Iranian they've ever met in their life. So how you behave reflects on how these people will perceive foreigners and Iranians in their life and what they think of us. So you better always be on your best behavior. You better never be rude to anybody. You ever better say thank you 2 or 3 times, because you're representing an entire country now, not just yourself.
You're representing both your family, your culture, your country.
Exactly.
You're everything.
Yeah. So don't be an asshole.
Okay.
And so that whole conversation was, okay, like how you carry yourself is important, because you're representing more than just yourself, right?
Okay.
And that carries through into our lives today, right? You represent your family, you represent a business, you represent a charitable organization, whatever the case may be, right? So I thought it was really good coaching from early on, and what that got converted to when we got to Canada was, you are now the first generation of a line of Moinis that are going to come after you. So set an example, both from a business perspective, but also from whatever, an ethical perspective, whatever the case may be. So that's always driven me to be like, I'm doing this, whatever it is that I'm building. And that's what drove me into entrepreneurship is I want to build something, because whatever I'm building hopefully does well for me and my immediate family, but hopefully does well for children and grandchildren as well.
I want to expand on that. So when your family brings you to Italy from Iran, why is it that you guys leave Iran? I think I know based off the years, but why did you guys decide to leave Iran?
Yeah, the years are critical. You hit the nail on the head. So I was born in '79, which was the year of the Iranian Revolution.
Yeah, okay.
And when it first happened, I think, so I was born into a family that was, educated, westernized, secular. And
really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so very clearly the mullahs coming into power wasn't good news.
Yep.
But it, I think, took a few years to realize how bad of a news it was, that there was no future there, and they needed to leave. And so we stayed there sort of the first, like I said, the first 5 years of my life. And I'll tell you, before I get into why Italy, I'll tell you into some of the things that happened, because I think this, we'll probably come back to kind of the theme of the immigrant experience and resilience. But here's my first 5 years is survived a tornado, survived a snake bite, survived the car getting shot through with anti-aircraft ammunition, survived buildings around me being bombed, because remember, this was also the Iran-Iraq war happening right after the revolution, right? And then just when I thought, okay, nothing else bad can happen, got run over by a car, both legs, right? So this is like the first 6 years of being around where you're like, holy shit, like a lot of bad things can happen. But that's not why we left.
It wasn't a hit by a car.
Yeah, the reason we left was, again, so my parents were like, the country's not trending in a positive direction.
Yeah.
And so we need to leave. And then my dad and his older brother, they've been educated in Italy. Like their parents have sent them abroad to get educated.
Okay.
So my dad, before I was born, had spent close to 2 decades in Italy doing his undergrad all the way to his PhD, started working in Italy. And it just happens by fluke that a company that he's working with in Italy sends him back to Iran to work on a project where he meets my mom, and eventually I'm born, right? Okay. So when we had to leave, Italy was a natural choice, and that's how we ended up going to Italy.
It was a home that he knew, but maybe not necessarily for your mom. Obviously your mom probably super supportive, ready to jump on board. But if I'm reading this right, your dad is the only one who's going to speak Italian when you get over there.
You would think so, but no. So here's why. Because where I was born, I was actually born in the middle of nowhere. So the reason I got a snake bite, your average town in Iran doesn't have snakes roaming around it, right? Okay. So the reason I was where I was with everything that happened is I was actually born on the Persian Gulf. So you hear, you might be familiar with the Straits of Hormuz. Well, a lot of the world's oil travels out of the Persian Gulf and into tankers. So the Iranian government had contracted an Italian construction firm to build a port on the Strait of Hormuz to facilitate the export of oils, right? And the Italian company had basically built a compound. There's no town at the time. They had to build. So they built
like a ghost city, or like a. I got it. What you're saying, like a city for the purpose of the workers.
For the purposes of building a port and building an actual city.
Got it.
Right. So they've got this compound that they've set up. So I'm born and live on this compound with all Italians. So when my dad meets my mom, she brings her back into the compound. My mom is surrounded by not Iranians, by all Italians. All that to say, she learned how to speak Italian. By the time we got to Italy, she could speak Italian.
Wow.
So I was the only one that couldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other siblings?
My younger sister.
Okay.
Who was born, when we moved to Italy, she was an infant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where, you said it was a small town. Where in Italy did you go?
So I went to what would today be considered a suburb of Rome.
Okay.
You're in the motorsport, so does the name Aprilia ring a bell?
Yep.
Is it Aprilia bike motorcycles?
Yep.
So the city's called Aprilia, no affiliation with the motorcycles.
Okay.
But it's about an hour outside of Rome. So, we were talking about this earlier where back in the day, an hour outside of a city was another world.
Yeah,
right?
it's not the same.
It's not the same. These days, it's probably a suburb.
Yep.
But, back then, it was a small town. It wasn't near a big city.
Okay. And then so you get there at 5.
Yeah.
You spend, because you say you come to Canada as a teenager, you spend about 6 years there or more. How long are you in Italy for?
I spent probably around 8 years because I came when I was 13 here.
8 years in Italy. Now, I remember, I've never had a child, but of what I hear of child rearing, 7 to 12 are key. 0 to 7 is like habit building. 7 to 12 is identity building. This is how it was told to. This is my father's logic, at least.
Okay.
At 13, is it easy for you to leave Italy? Or is it hard? Are you ready to go to Canada to carry this mantle for your family, or were you very much ready to be an Italian for the rest of your days?
I'm not sure that at 13 I identified as anything, whether it was Iranian or Italian or anything else. But what I do know for sure is I didn't want to come because I didn't even know where the hell it was. I mean, I remember my dad coming home and saying, because he talked about it, he signaled it. He signaled that we're going to move. And the reason for it is because if you know anything about Italy, you know that it's not a meritocracy, right? It's who you know or who you can pay to get ahead. Yeah. And so he was like, I don't want the kids growing up in this. I want the kids to be able to get by their own wits and their own intelligence and education. Capitalism, meritocracy, whatever you want to call it, right? And so he was like, yeah, so this isn't it. Like the older kid's getting old enough that we need to start thinking about where he's going to go to university. Okay. And I don't want him going to university here. And so he started doing research on places to emigrate to. And I remember he had this distinct memory. He came home one day and he threw down a booklet that had what I didn't realize at the time, but I know now, was a picture of the Rideau Canal in Ottawa, people skating on it. Yeah. And he was like, this is where we're moving. We're moving here. We're moving to Canada. And I literally had to go up to first of all, I cried. And then the second thing I did was I went to my room to pull up a map to see where the hell Canada was, because I had no conception of where it was. And I was like, and I remember the only solace I found, I was like, oh, I'm going to be close to New York City. That's great. I've always wanted to go to New York. Okay. But that's about it. That's all I had. And so when we moved here, I thought, wow, this is the one ugly ass place. Right? Like, it's just the worst weather, no architecture, where the fuck are the museums and the art? Because I think something like 70% of the art patronage in the world belongs to Italy, right? Mm-hmm. So like you could throw a stone and hit something that's 1,000 years old. Yeah. And I remember coming here in Toronto, Toronto's really evolved as a metropolis the past 10, 20 years, but you get here in 91.
You're here in 91, so different. 91 Toronto is underdeveloped, Regent Park probably. Yeah. It's getting a bit overrun at that point. That's pre-Raptors.
Recession.
Yeah, recession, 13.5%.
Yeah.
If you're here, is that Bob Ray? Is that Ray Days?
Yeah.
Is that Bob Ray's?
Ray Days.
Yeah, okay. Ray Days. That's a tough time.
It's not a great time. It's not a great time to get here in January.
Yeah, that's a tough time. That's tough. Well, the Jays, I think the Jays would have just won the World Series. They're about to win one.
They're about to win one. I was here for that. I was here for that. Yeah. And so, so I was just horrified. I was like, I don't understand why we're here, what we're doing, and I can't communicate with anybody. So it was not great times to start. Do
you go straight to Toronto, or are you in a suburb? Are you in Woodbridge, Richmond Hill, Scarborough?
Thornhill.
Your father sounds like a very employable individual. Does he have a job in the big smoke in Toronto, or is he working out in Thornhill, or what is his employment at this time?
No, I mean, I think that's what, you talk about what builds resilience and mental toughness and not making excuses. Yeah. I look at, a lot of people kind of look at me and they're like, well, you're tough and you're resilient, you've achieved a lot. And I'm like, no, I haven't. Yeah. Look at what my parents did, right? My parents not only moved once, moved twice. Yeah. When they moved from Iran to Italy, there was connections in Italy to help with settlement and jobs and all that stuff.
Because they'd gone to school there.
And we actually had some family there.
Yep. Plus working for the company that had that Italian base. I would imagine being in that Italian town helps a bit too.
You got it. Yep. So the connections are there. Yeah. You go from Italy to Canada, there's absolutely no connection. You're not talking about leaving a comfortable life in a country that you understand culturally, you speak the language, to a country that you don't understand at all. You have no connections. It's just you're doing it purely for the kids.
Yeah.
You think about like the resilience and the balls it takes to do that. I'm not sure I'd have those balls. I'm not sure I do. Right.
2 kids in, probably. I mean, 2 kids in is tough too.
Yeah, 2 kids in is tough as well, right? So it was just come here, sort of liquidate what you've got, come here with the nest egg, no job, and figure it out. And that's what they did.
Figure it out. For those who don't know, I mean, obviously interest rates are doing what they're doing right now. 1991 Canada, 13.5% interest.
Yeah.
With a mayor, Bob Ray, we were kind of joking about it. Bob Ray was a very NDP mayor who was running a great deal of social programs. And I don't think that the society or economy or the population density was enough to handle it. So you started to see aggressive things happening. This is the beginning of teachers going on strike, services getting. I mean, I think they had a garbage crisis at some point. I mean, this is a different Toronto.
Yeah.
But it's also just infusing that sort of immigrants perspective. It's also an influx of people coming from a lot of different places in the world. I think it's around that time that federally Canada understands, okay, we're not gonna birth our way to mass. We're gonna have to immigrate our way to mass.
Yeah.
Now, granted, people say it's hard to immigrate to Canada because you can't come if you have a felony, you can't come if you have a prior. But outside of that, it's not. If you're a Commonwealth country, it's usually a relatively simplistic process. So this is a expanding and growing Canada.
Right.
You come here, you're 13 years old, which means that you're going to spend your high school around these individuals, around these people.
Yeah.
So this is that next chapter of your life.
Yeah.
You've gone from, not to be indelicate, but you've essentially gone from war-torn to historically preserved, which is what Italy is, to developing, to blank canvas.
Yeah.
What is that like for you? What is your relationship like with, because obviously you talk about your relationship with Iran building your toughness. You talk with your relationship with Italy, almost building your love of the history, your love of the architect, your love of the arts, your taste for the finer things, this sense of culture. And in Canada now, there's this new emergent culture. What is that like for this young man who's taking from so many different sort of vantage points?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I could put my finger for a very, very long time on what exactly Canadian culture is.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's a bit of a joke because most Canadians probably would have a hard time. Like, it's the whole thing. What does it mean to be Canadian, right? And I struggle with that personally because I was like, what is it? Like, what does it mean to be Canadian, right? And so where I think I came to terms with it, and this is probably only like in the last 10 years, was the beauty of it is it's whatever you make it, particularly in a city like Toronto, right? And so I think it was just saying, look, to me, to be Canadian in Canada, the way I rationalize it to myself is it provides the Canadian dream combines, American style opportunity without the probability that you will get shot at any point in time when you leave your house. If I can put it that way, right? So you've got kind of the upside of the US, not quite to the same degree, without all the downside of the US. And I'm talking as an entrepreneur now, but I'm also talking as a parent, as a family man, right? And so when I got into my corporate career and started having a successful corporate career, I had the opportunity to relocate to Asia, to relocate to Europe. And that's when I realized how much I like Canada, is because I had the choice and I made the conscious choice to be like, I've been those places and I would not choose to raise my kid in those places. I realize how good I've got it here. And so that was one proof point, if you will. The other proof point was when you work for multinational corporations, you always have people cycling in from other parts of the world. And these guys would come in and they would never want to leave. They would come to Canada on a secondment for 2, 3, whatever years. Secondment would be up and they'll be like, can we find something for me to stay here? I don't want to go back to London, to Milan, to Hong Kong, wherever I came from, because I like the quality of life here. And I was like, yeah, well, you know what? This is what Canada's all about, right? It provides that, that safety, that stability, and Canadians are, so they're fiscally conservative and socially liberal, right? And that's the balance. And if you're okay with that balance, it's a great place to be and a great place to thrive.
Fiscally conservative, socially liberal. I like that touch point. I think that's a very interesting way of saying what Canada is. Most people who complain about Canada, I always argue, haven't actually lived anywhere else. they've vacationed other places.
Right.
And they're using their vacation experience to besmirch Canada. Canada provides a great deal. I tell people all the time, I would not be me if not for the fact that I was Canadian in the ways that society was able to both help and hurt me, right? Because you got to develop your hardship in a certain way.
Yeah.
I'm a totally different person if I'm in Atlanta. I'm a different person if I'm in New York. I'm a different person if I'm in LA. I'm definitely a different person if I'm in London. I'm a different person if I'm in Paris. I'm a different person if I'm in the Middle East. Canada's the one place because of that immigration component, you're somewhere else, but you can feel home.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been to Iran. When I speak to people, they have their nest egg of people. Like, I've yet to meet, at least in Canada, it is rare that you meet someone who's a silo.
Right.
What I mean by that is, you know, if you go to China and you see a person who looks like myself, Nubian black, and you say, hey, we're your friends. They're not usually going to have a convent of other Nubian black individuals that they're connecting with in this culture. It's usually they're assimilating, which is just nothing wrong with that, but that's just what those other countries provide. Canada is one of those where you have your core and you're choosing to sort of mix.
Yeah. So
there's no assimilation, there's mixing. Mixing provides learning. It allows you to create something new, which I think drives us to how, before we transition, because obviously you allude to, you have a successful corporate career working for one of the largest insurance companies in North America, a Titan name. I'll let you mention it if you want, but a Titan name, very comfy, working under, you know, some people that you respect, things adjust, you make a decision to go out on your own.
Yeah.
How hard was it for you? Because obviously when you work in an enterprise like that, you are a part of capitalism.
Yeah.
But to go into entrepreneurship, you're now essentially going out to drive capitalism.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to get you essentially, when you work for a company, you're getting your money from the business. Someone is paying you. When you start a company, you're waiting for your money from the world.
Yeah.
You got to get it. You got to get it from the atmosphere.
Yeah.
How hard was that a transition for you to make?
It was, let me go back a step to something that you said, because I want to pick up on it before we get into the transition. So, because I think you've hit the nail on the head. Just go back on the Canadian discussion, because one of the reasons why I like Canada, I admire Canada, is whenever people ask me where you're from, I always struggle to answer that question, because I feel no more or less Iranian at this point in my life. Yeah. Iranian, then Italian, then Canadian.
Okay.
Right? And so it's sort of, but Canada is a type of society and space where you can say that and no one's going to judge you or hate on you for that, right? They'll be like, okay, man, that's cool. You do you. I get you, right? Yeah. And especially if you live in this big city like Toronto, there's so many people that are like that and understand what you mean when you say that. So I think that's what, you know, to your point around, you know, assimilation and multiculturalism, it's not contrived. It's not forced down your throat like it might be in some other parties, like assimilate or move on, like the US. And I really like that for my kids, right? Is that where they go to school and who they go to school with, it's so diverse that, you know, kids, you know, the old idiom of kids don't see color, they don't. They're complete, you know, until the world gets to them.
Yeah, the world gets to them and then they see it. But in the beginning, they don't,
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, do your kids go to private school or public school?
Great question. So they go to public school. Okay. And I like them going to public school. I'm very conflicted about them going to private school. Okay. So I don't think we have any, my wife and I have talked about it, I don't think we have any issues with public school up until high school. Okay. And then high school becomes a question of, you know, do you want a more controlled environment, arguably, that private school can provide versus,
which is a safety and exposure thing for you at that point, I guess.
Yeah, because where I went to high school, and I did not go to high school in a bad neighborhood, there was gangs, there was guys that had guns, firearms in their lockers, there was all that stuff, and that was in like an affluent neighborhood. Yeah, in the GTA, right?
Same. I went to school in the suburbs, and some of the stuff, it's just that nature of public school. Yeah, you get to see the world a little bit. Yeah, you know, but
yeah. But here's the thing. Yeah. Do you, particularly with kids, like for example, mine who are, what's the word? You know, they're fortunate, right? They're growing up privileged lives, right? Yep. do you want to keep cocooning them by putting them in a private school? Do you want them to go to high school like that and see the real world, so to speak?
I always think it depends on the child, right? If again, I don't have one, but I used to be a youth leader. I was a youth leader in church for like a decade. It's 10 years of my life. So I saw different young people who dealt with different things. You earn the right to send your kid to public school if you're a very present parent, because they're going to spend about 6 hours of the day there. They're going to come home. You better be able to feed another 3 hours at home, focused, not kind of around, a focused 3 hours. Then I think you're fine. Because though I was exposed to a lot of things in high school, my home messaging offset it so aggressively that I really was able to pick and choose. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I did. So for example, okay, this is one that I'm embarrassed to say it now, but I'm in high school. The big thing that's happening is Crips and Bloods, like this gang affiliation thing. So you're either red or blue. I knew enough to know, okay, I'll probably wear a bandana, but I'm not going to wear red or blue colors because I'm not going to alienate myself or link myself to any one of these two groups, because I do kind of understand where that goes based off what was told to me in my home life. Yeah. But there are ways that you want to find tribe as a young man. Right. Little things like that, you know. My parents were also, I mean, this just happened to be my thing. I was very involved in church. So every Friday I had somewhere to go, and I was a volunteer, and then all day Sunday, and then you have Wednesday Bible study. So 3 of my days are connected to this messaging that's consistent with what my parents are saying. And then, yeah, sure, I got my 5 days at school where I'm playing sports teams and stuff, but then you're talking to your other, hey, do you go to church? And then the conversation just kind of evolved. If it was a free open canvas, like I just go to school, come home, and I wait for my parents to, you know, and then we eat together maybe without the messaging, yeah, it'd be different. Yeah. It would have been dramatically different.
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, so to go back to your question around...
how do you make the jump?
How do you make the jump?
Because the jump is scary, especially when you have... Because you are older, which is why I find your jump more interesting. The time I made my jump, I was working for a company called Genworth. I had finished college about 2 years prior. I was a regional auditor for Genworth. So I was auditing mortgage bank approvals and I was assessing risk. It was a phenomenal job. I had a company card. At 23 years old, I was making a 6-figure income. So I remember thinking... Not even 23, I was 22. Yeah, 22, 6-figure income. I remember scaling it out and thinking, okay, I'm going to do this for 8 years. They like me. I know how to play corporate. I know how to play politics. I know how to do it. I'll get the big job. 8 years, I'll get close. Yeah. And then, you know, they give you the chart. So I Google it and you take a look. $350 a year. $350 a year regional guy. Wasn't happy. And I remember just thinking that if I master this lane that I'm in right now, I'm going to get $350 a year. And the big job, by the time I'm 30 or 32, I don't want it. Yeah. That was the moment when I said, okay, I got to make the jump.
Yeah, I had that. Okay. That was one of the drivers. But for me, I mean, to take it back, you know, you don't always... So here's the thing. There's somebody in my network right now who had a great line. They told me, they said, you know, it's always good for your kids... They were giving me their parental wisdom, right? And they had like 3 or 4 things they wanted to pass on. And one of those bullets was, you want your kids to have a mentor, and that mentor can't be one of their parents. Okay. Find a mentor for your kid, somebody that you like for the kid to look up to, that the kid can connect with, that can be a positive influence in their life. That's not mom or dad, because mom and dad are always lecturing and this and that. Somebody that they admire. You want your kid to have that. Yeah. And I thought about that. I thought, first of all, it's a great line. And I thought about myself, and I was like, I definitely had that. And who I had was my uncle, my father's brother in Italy, who was a very successful entrepreneur, put his kids in a top-notch private school. Okay. They developed their networks in, you know, the right circles in Europe. Yep. You know, married the right way, so on and so forth. And I thought, you know, I'm not sure I realized it, but subliminally, that's always been my mentor. Right? Okay. Right. So I never thought about it that way. Yeah. But if I thought about who I look up to and who I'd want to emulate from like if
even only subconsciously, like just this natural pull to
from a material perspective, and on top of that, just a good dad, right? Like not an absent dad, good dad, held the line, traveled a lot, but was not absent, you know, that kind of thing, right? So like ticked all the right boxes. Which is possible, by the way,
for those who think that you can't, it's very possible to travel a lot, but not be absent. Absentee fatherism is not a measure of geography, I don't think.
That's just an excuse. Yeah, you can be there. And so, So I just thought like as a figure of somebody you want to look up to as a man, I thought like that was the guy, right? And so that is the guy. He's still around, luckily. And so I kind of did the same projection forward you did. And I was like, it doesn't matter how I knock it out of the park here. I got to the top of this pyramid.
Yeah.
I'm not building the life this dude's built for himself. Like it just ain't happening, right? And then, you know, the other part of it too was it's not all altruistic. Like I like nice stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you see the guys that are like had the fancy titles and whatever come in with like the worst suits.
Yep.
And you're like, this is not what
enough.
I aspire
Not
to,
enough,
right?
dude.
Like that's not what I want. I've seen what a nice suit is. I grew up in Italy, goddammit. That's not it. And so it was a combination of those things. So then I had tried, to your point about it, I did it when I was older. I tried a couple of times when I was younger and it didn't work out, right? Like the penny didn't drop, it didn't work out. So then the third time around during the pandemic, when the opportunity came around, to your point, I was like, well, like hopefully the third time's a charm, because if I don't do it now, by the time the next one comes around, it might actually be too late at that point in time, right? So I gave it a go, and it was, I don't know if this is good advice, but the reason I wasn't scared is because I didn't think about it. I was just like, fuck it. I'm just going to barrel forward. I'm going to do it. And I'm just not even going to think about like failure being an option. I'm just going to go, right? And so I was just lucky that I have a supportive spouse, because I don't think you can take that attitude and move forward without a spouse that supports you, right?
How long have you been, if you don't mind me asking, how long have you been married?
So I've been married, this year's going to be 14 years.
14 years.
Yeah.
So you were 10 years in when you say, hey, babes, big change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, it's a good time.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. Like, she didn't even bat an eye. She's like, I trust your judgment.
Wow.
You do you.
Yeah.
And let's do this. And she's super supportive, but the way she's supportive is she just doesn't, she doesn't interfere, right? She lets me do what I got to do. She stands back. She's like, if you need to talk, you know, I'm here.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'll let you do what you got to do, right? Yeah. And so it's been a journey, man. Like you know, you're very articulate, and you've hit on a lot of the ways it's different from life in the corporate world. And I think when I started, I knew some of that, but definitely not all of it. Yeah. It's been like a massive learning journey.
Yeah. I think for me, when I think about entrepreneurship, and I think about the process of trying to be an entrepreneur, and I look at the generation that we're in now, or that I'm a part of, I'm seeing where the taste for entrepreneurship is going down a little bit, but probably because of the cost.
Okay.
Entrepreneurship is not glamorous, right? Like, it is rewarding.
Yeah.
There are moments of incredible reward. They may even extend for a long period of time. But I've never seen somebody sell their company and that was their goal when they started the company.
Right.
Their goal when they started the company, I want to make this the biggest, baddest thing ever. Right. And then one day, for scale or for whatever, for health, I'll dump it. And then they make their EBITDA and they walk away. Too often I'm seeing people want to run to entrepreneurship as a means to like have a long-standing vacation.
Interesting.
I don't see it being something where they want to go and actually struggle for it.
Yeah.
For example, I remember so I played college football. My favorite story is the Michigan Wolverines under Coach Wooten. He has a sign, and it was like actually it was Bo Schembechler. Bo Schembechler's coaching the Michigan Wolverines. He comes in. They said, you know, a football team's gonna have about 44 guys, 53 guys, 53-man roster. In college, you get like 200 guys showing up, especially in Michigan. Said they were having 10 guys quit every day. And they're losing so many players, and the coaches come to him and say, man, because he's running them hard. His famous line is, I'll treat you all the same like dogs. And he was running them like crazy in the dead of summer. He puts up a sign and he says, those who stay will be champions. The sign is still there in Michigan Wolverine Stadium today. That heart, that mentality, I don't know that people understand how much mentality is key. Yeah. Not skill, not ability, mentality.
Yeah.
If you think about the hardest day that you've had running your business versus the hardest day you had when you were working for someone else's business, how would you compare the two?
I don't think there's any comparison, because when you're running your own business, it's when you're dealing with issues, they're existential issues, right? They're not corporate issues, right? So I'll tell you, like, I'll give you a very good example. Like the hardest, I don't know if it's the hardest, but it was definitely top of the list, and more recent in my memory, because it's just happened more recently, was, you know, during the pandemic, within my P&L, at the corporate, in my corporate job, I had the healthcare business. So if you think about, if you can stretch your mind to what was happening in hospitals and long-term care centers and elder care centers during the pandemic, like I had that portfolio, very, very large portfolio across Canada, that business during the pandemic. And there was a lot of not great things that were happening at the time. And so you were dealing with a lot of dark topics and issues. And, you know, you're doing that on top of having to basically oversee a business remotely. And so there was a lot going on. And just in insurance in general, I don't think people realize you deal with a lot of morbid shit, right? Like in insurance, you're dealing with anything that happens in society, whether it's, you know, terrorism, it's medical malpractice, it's any ills of society, somehow at the end of the day touch on insurance. People, insurance companies have to deal with them. And so you deal with all that, but it's you deal with it in a way that you can compartmentalize it, and it's over there to a certain perspective. Whereas I think within an entrepreneur journey, it hits home a lot more, because it's sort of like a lot of times, particularly when you get going and early on in the journey, it's existential stuff that you're dealing with, right? To your point, if you can't raise the capital, the key ain't gonna open the door tomorrow, right? If you can't raise the capital, people who believed in you and have followed you to come and do this thing aren't gonna get paid, because you're not gonna make payroll, right? So I think the challenges are, from my perspective at least, I think it's a lot more real and it's a lot more difficult. And to your point, I think that's a great line where you say people underestimate how much positive thinking, or whatever you want to call it, mental resilience, positive thinking, the right mental attitude helps you get through it. Because for me personally, if you can't maintain that right mental equilibrium, because it's ultimately up to on your shoulders to solve the problem when the going gets tough. And I've said this to other like new entrepreneurs. I've said, understand, it doesn't matter who's around you, who's supporting you.
It's your call.
It's at the end of the day, your back's against the wall. You're gonna have to solve it. No one else is gonna be able to, or is gonna be there when the going really gets tough. You're gonna have to fix it. And so you have to have the right state of mind to do that, and just not to crumble mentally, right? And to just be able to get through some of those periods. So, and I draw a lot of inspiration from football. I you know, it's funny that you brought that up. I draw a lot of inspiration from football and football philosophy in terms of being able to get through some of those periods.
Random question, as a young guy, young unmarried guy talking to another entrepreneur who is a married guy, if you were unmarried and running your business, do you think it would be easy for you to find a spouse? Because your business, let's say it's beyond your business doing well, because I would assume, of the little I know from when you did meet your spouse, so we're talking 10 years, you were kind of already, not a rock star, but you're well on your way in the insurance business at that point. So there's a level of stability that you must feel. That stability is what drives a lot of men to say, nah, I can do it. I can take on a woman. I can look at me, I'm doing okay. If you're single, unmarried, but running your business with everything we just talked about, do you think it'd be easier or harder for you to have gotten married?
It's a good question. It's not one that I've ever thought about, to be honest with you. I think, you know, I guess because your premise is the stability helps you make the commitment.
Unless it was a different thing for you. But I know they say 73% of people who aren't getting married think it's too expensive. 73% of the demographic 18 to 45, they're not doing it because they think it's too expensive. So I'm assuming you were in that 27% thinking, I got it.
You know what? It's funny. So I know this is going to make me sound like I'm an absolute robot, but romance was just a fraction of what I considered when I got married. Okay. And so what I mean by that is there was two things that were more important in finding a spouse. Okay. All right. Okay. Here we go. And we were talking about this, I think, before the cameras got rolling. I wasn't planning on getting married when I met my future wife, right? It all just happened fortuitously because my buddy screwed me in Cancun, basically. we can get into that later. But so I just ended up meeting her and shit.
So you're in Mexico. You're in Cancun, Mexico, on what's supposed to be a boys' trip.
So I've just broken up with my girlfriend.
Okay.
And I'm in.
Her loss, by the way. He's a successful CEO now.
Yes, I still run into her from time to time at the grocery store.
Good for her.
I'll make sure to tell her that. You're a loss. So I'd broken up with her. A friend that I was going to university with said, I'm arranging a boys trip to go to Cancun.
Yeah.
Do you want to go? It's like,
Where'd you go to college, by the way? Where'd you go to university?
So I went all over the place. So this story, when this happened, I went to what's now called TMU.
TMU Toronto Met. So you're at formerly Rye
High.
Yeah, Rye High.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I don't think it like that. They like that. But I was at Ryerson, then I went to U of T, then I went to Laurier, then I went to Oxford.
You went everywhere.
Yeah. So I did a bit of everything.
And he was well learned. I don't know why this girl let you walk out the door, right? I got degrees for everywhere.
That's another story altogether. Wasn't her fault. Let's put it that way.
Oh dear. Okay.
So he says, boys trip, let's go.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you when you take this boys trip?
Mid-20s, I'm going to say.
Mid-20s, okay.
Early mid-20s.
So you think I got time too? I'm not looking for a wife at all. I'm just going to go have fun on this trip.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Okay.
No. And the whole point was I just broken up. So it's like, let's go to Cancun and let's have some fun,
Yeah.
right? So I said to him, I says, I'll go. I only have one condition. Yeah. I said, this trip, like everybody else is going on this trip, it's your buddies from your circle. I'm the only guy that's coming from school that you know. So I'm not going to know anyone else.
Yeah.
And, it's double occupancy when you go to these resorts. So I want to stay in the room with you. I don't want to stay with some rando that I don't know.
Because I don't know this guy. Yeah.
Because I don't know anybody else. I don't want to go. He's like, all right, no, it's all good. Let's go. So we go. We show up to the airport. It's me, him, a couple other guys, a couple of girls that are going from Toronto. So we show up there. We land there. The night we land at a resort, we're just grabbing a drink before we even check into the room, and he calls me aside. He's like, listen, just one thing. He's like, what? I go, he's like, I've got a girl coming here that's going to meet me here. I need the room. I cannot have you in the room. I really need you to bunk with somebody else. I'm like, man, I told you I said one thing I don't want to do. He's like, no, it's all good. It's all good. Like, it's not even a dude. It's that girl right over there. And I said, but that's even worse
yeah.
to be bunking with a girl, right? When you're in Cancun. He's like, come on, do me the solid, yada, 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 this and that. So that's how I end up meeting my wife.
Your wife is the roommate?
My wife is the roommate.
Get out of town.
Yeah.
Okay. Years later, did he admit, was this a setup?
No.
This is an accident.
He was just an asshole. Yeah. Yeah. And he's a cop with the Toronto Metropolitan Service now, so he's definitely an asshole.
Golly.
Right? But he's great guy, obviously, great guy. But no, it was legitimate, just a bait and switch. This was not a setup. And so I ended up meeting her that way. And then, we just stayed in touch and it developed over time. But when it got serious, the reason why I thought she was the one, it was because the other two criteria was, number one, I'd seen my dad go through rough patches professionally.
Okay.
And I knew how important it was that your spouse stuck with you through those periods and supported you.
Yes.
Rather than be ambivalent or stick the knife in, because that can crumble you.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew she would stick by her man. Like I knew that was the.
Was there a moment, or was it just years of seeing her character?
It was just it was just years of dating and understanding that and not, so that was that. I'll get back to something else. So that was one thing, and then the other thing was she always knew I was ambitious. Yeah. So you fast forward 10 years and it's like, hey, I want to cut this break from this comfortable life and do something that's risky.
Yeah.
It wasn't a surprise to me that she was like, yes, because I tested for that right at the start. Right. Okay. So that's what I mean when I say it was all calculated for me. It was because I needed to find the right person that I knew would evolve with me the way I was through my life. Yeah. Right. And then the last thing I always say, I'm probably going to get in a lot of trouble for saying this, is look at the mom, because that will just tell you the genetics. So mom's super fit. So I was like, all right, everything's going to work out.
So you check the genetics for futures. You're vetting futures. She has to respect your ambition.
Yeah.
And she has to stick by her man. She has to be loyal.
That's right.
She checked all three. She had a good mom.
Yeah.
Loved your ambition. Was going to be loyal.
Yeah.
And then it was game on.
Yeah. And again, it's not so much loyalty. It's just, are you, because loyalty's almost become a dirty word in the post-Trump world, right? So it wasn't this like blind loyalty of stick by your man 1955. It was more so, when tough things happen, do I know you're going to be there and you're not going to bolt for the door because you're all about yourself, right? And so I knew that that you had a good human there.
So understanding that criteria, obviously it wasn't stability then. It was somebody who respects your ambition, could go through the hard times.
Yeah.
So that being said, it suggests that even in your entrepreneurship journey with the extra stress, you would have still had the capacity for a spouse. You would still be able to make the choice to get married in your entrepreneur's pursuits.
Yeah, I for sure. I don't know. Yes. So sorry. So the short answer to your question is I don't know that it would have made a difference for me, but part of it is also cultural.
Okay.
Right. So again, like the way I was raised at my age, not to be married would have been taboo. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. What?
How old were you when you got married?
When I was pretty old actually. So I was 30, which I guess by today's standards isn't too bad. But I thought it was old
to get married.
I thought it was like a lot of probably a good 75% to 80% of my friends were married before me.
You got married in 90. No, you got married 2008, 2007?
2010.
Gosh, that's close.
Yeah, 2010.
2010. 2010 is, okay.
Yeah.
You thought 30 was old to get married in 2010? Yeah,
I thought
time
so.
to change them.
I thought so. Because...
Would you tell your daughters the same thing? You have daughters?
I wouldn't tell them anything. I wouldn't, because just... You don't even know how the world's going to change by the time they're at that age. So we try not to... And we're not like an overly political correct family, but we try not to impose any sort of biases on them to be like, oh, like, do you want to get married? Who do you want to get? Because I don't even know what their sexual orientation is. So I don't even know if they're going to get married. So I don't, and even the bias of, we were talking earlier around, in my family when I was growing up, it was, you know, there was an expectation that you were going to get the postgraduate degree, right? I'm sure you've seen it. We've all seen it. So many of our friends have these worthless degrees from universities that have done absolutely nothing for them in their professional life.
We have a story coming out about it. In 2020, believe it or not, Canada tipped the world as the highest percentage of individuals 18 to 35 with a college degree, bachelor or higher. 66%. So 66% of our people are supposed to be higher educated.
Right.
And yet we see, I don't know if it's having too much of an impact on how our world is working.
Yeah. So exactly. And so I don't even go.
If I could go back, I wouldn't go to school. I needed school for the structure. I didn't know who I was. I will be very clear. I was a young kid. I was highly obedient. I just followed what my parents said to me.
Yeah.
So I needed to go to school.
Yeah.
If I could go back knowing what I know now, I would not have gone to school. I would have started my business right away.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about that on the way here.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about like the people that I know in my life that have been successful. I don't think whether they went to school or what they did in school had a bearing on their success. There was another it factor that helped them drive forward and be successful. And arguably, they would have achieved a level of success in their life, regardless of whether they held that piece of paper or not, right? And so, so for that reason, you know, I want the kids to get good grades because I want them to live to their full potential, do well at what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
But not because we're driving, you know, the tiger mom culture of you got to have a 99% average because you got to get into like the best school ever and this and that.
So people talk about that, right? They talk about the tiger mom. Tiger Woods talks about his father. You know, the Williams sisters, they talk about their father. There is this world of over excelling parents creating kids that can be great, but they also can blow. I personally think it comes down to the child, but I don't know. Do you think, I mean, you've had blank canvas young girls and you've seen them grow. How much influence do you think you have had, you as an individual? Because parents are probably your single biggest influence, but they're not the only influence. The rest of the pie is probably still 70% or 60%, whatever. How much influence do you think you could have had to sort of tiger mom your kids to make them, I don't know, super hyper, you know? I think it's hard to tell because it's an unfinished project, right? Yeah. So my kids are 11 and 8, so they're quite young. Still young, okay.
And
you can turn it on now, man.
Well, I'll tell you, and I have, but I they can turn on a dime as well, right? Like when they turn into teenagers, so it's hard to tell. But like I will tell you like a couple of things that I know for sure at this point in the journey. One of them is before I had kids, I didn't know. I was like, yeah, like what's the deal? Like, do they do they come out of the womb with their own personality, or do you and the world sets their personality?
Yeah.
What I think I know for sure now is they come out of the womb with their own personality.
You think so?
Well, I know so because
Fresh out.
Own personality.
Okay.
Immediately.
1 second. What do you think? You have kids. I don't have kids. We're checking with the producer. What do you think? Yes or no? Do they come out with their own personality? 50-50. Wow. I'm learning something from the fathers in the room. Okay. So they come up with their own personality.
Yeah, it's like mine couldn't be any more different, right from when they were young.
Wow.
They couldn't have been any more different from each other.
Okay.
And that trajectory stuck.
Okay.
And so one's been very sweet, kind soul. The other one's an asshole. And it just, it's been like that since the start. Yeah. And I don't mean like an asshole in a bad way. Like, the asshole is the one that will make you laugh. They'll give you love. That's affectionate, right? But it's also the one that's like, I'm not doing this. Go fuck yourself, right? So so they're very different.
Okay.
And so that's one thing. And then the other one is that your parenting, there is such a thing as parenting, because my kids are very well behaved. They will not misbehave. They're in public. They'll do what they're told. And I look at a lot of the kids that are the same age are in our social circle and the way they're being raised, and they're completely out of control. And it's to me, that's like that's the parenting and the coddling that's doing that.
My mom used to say that parenting was a test of will. And I said, because I used to joke, my mom is insane. I love you, Mom. My mom is crazy. So there was one time I said, Mom, how did you, because there are times that I listened to my mother and consciously I didn't want to. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense. Like in my own mind, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I'll put a perfect example. There was one time my mom and I, so my mom was very passionate. We got into it one time and I was upset. Okay, fine. You know, and my mom lives, for those who don't know, my mom lives essentially an hour north from here. She lives in Orangeville. But she lives by herself. So I usually go up, I shovel her snow and I cut her grass. Recently I've stopped because my schedule isn't as open. So I send people to do it. But like back in the day, I didn't have money to pay. So Mom, I'm coming up, I'm gonna shovel your snow and cut your grass. But we get into like a big argument. Like I was really upset, you know? So I'm like, I'm not coming to cut the grass. So I'm in Brampton at the time. She's in Orangeville, and like just like nothing had happened. She just calls. Are you gonna be here in 30 minutes, 40 minutes? And everything in my body was like, I'm not coming. And I couldn't bring myself to tell my mom no.
Yeah.
And sure, I was the angriest I'd ever cut the grass before in my life. I cut it, I bagged it, bye Mom, kiss on the cheek, just got back in the car, and I just didn't understand. I asked her, how did you, she was, being a parent is a test of love and the breaking of wills.
Yeah, that's a great line.
And I was like, wow. She goes, so I let you know from young, my will is stronger than yours, but I love you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in a weird way, when I think about it, I've always, like, there's many years I thought, yeah, my mom was superhuman. She'll outlast me. She'll out whatever me in love. And
it's really fascinating that you say that, because I'm experiencing both sides of that right now.
Okay.
So as a dad and as a son.
Okay.
Because as a son, I've used that exact same, as a father, I've used that exact same line with my wife, with the asshole kid. Okay. And to be fair, she's turned into a great little girl, but when she was a toddler and
testing.
Yeah, just a dick. Mm-hmm. And I used to always say to my, we need to break her.
Yeah.
It's like a stallion. You need to break her, because if you don't break her now, good luck later when she's a teenager, right? So you cannot let her get away with it now, right? And I used to use that phrase. And my wife initially thought like, that's like a ridiculous comment for you to make, right? And then eventually she came around to, yeah, you're right. Like that's what needs to happen. You need to be tough and you need to break. And then you smooth it over with the love, right? Yep. And then interestingly, with my mother, who thank God is still around, it's been the same battle, but the opposite of, you're no longer going to break me. Like, we're past that point, right? You can try your guilt trips and all this other stuff, but there's no more breaking. And now, and unfortunately, like, I've had to do the breaking to be like, I'm just going to demonstrate that this is done. There's no more break. I will not shovel. Yeah. Right? Not today, at least. Yeah. To demonstrate that I've broken. Yeah. Then I'll come and do it tomorrow. Okay. Because memories should be short because it's family. Right? Yep. Yeah.
One of the things that I've been struggling with, which is why I love talking to other entrepreneurs, other operators, because I think there are people that run businesses and they work in the business, not on the business. I love talking to those people who've taken that extra step where they work on their business. They're vision casting, they're building teams, they're they're sequencing up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years into the future. I think that's a different game, if you understand what I mean. And I'm not besmirching anybody. I mean, there's always that time when you're working in the business, then hopefully you graduate to working on the business.
Yeah.
All that mental capacity as an operator, all the information you need to hold, all the ways you manage your staff. I sit at a point right now where I think, just because we're talking about marriage, children, if I don't get married, I don't think I'll ever be truly vulnerable with somebody ever again. Now, it's not to say I don't have mentors or people that I talk to, but there's that power dynamic. There's that structure as an entrepreneur, as an operator that I never want to break. And I don't know that anybody but my wife would ever get it.
Okay.
I'm curious what that's like for you, having your wife who is supportive, but also you have a co-founder and partners. What is your journey like with how you flow information, how you flow your pain, how you flow your frustration? Because the battle of a leader is to be eternally optimistic, and everything isn't always eternally optimistic.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
In a very unhealthy way.
What do you mean?
So I am not the one to offer advice on that topic.
What do you do?
What do I do? Oh, you don't want to know that. No, I'll tell you. So I'll tell you what I mean by that. So it's only half a joke, actually. I'm only half kidding. I am very bad at. So here's an example. I never talk to my wife about work unless it's something that I need to give her a heads up on, because it will impact us jointly in some way, like financially or hey, there's this business trip coming up that I need you to join me on. Then I'll tell her. But otherwise, I will never ever talk to her about work
at all. Okay, Godfather 1 ending. Never ask me about my affairs.
Never ask me about my business, but not because obviously I'm out there whacking people, but it's just I'm not talking. I don't talk to anybody about anything. So and it's just part of my personality, right? It's not because I'm trying to hold my cards close to my chest, or I would love to be able to go home and just talk to my wife about how my day went.
Why don't you?
I don't know, and that's what I'm saying. It's not healthy. So I'm not suggesting that it's anybody do that, because I think it would be very healthy. I think I aspire to do that, but I have some sort of mental block that I don't really talk to anybody about anything unless I absolutely have to, including the closest people in my life, right? So it's, the old idiom of the immigrant mom. You ask her, what does your son do? He does computers. That's if you ask anybody in my life what I do, they have no idea, zero idea what I actually do, because I don't talk to anybody about it, right? But that hasn't held me back from being vulnerable, because in my life, I had, in my corporate life, very good mentors and coaches that taught me that if you are not vulnerable, nobody is you will never be a leader, and no one's ever going to follow you if they don't see that vulnerability in you, right? And so we've built a great little team in my business. There's a lot of transparency. There's a lot of hierarchy. You introduced me as a CEO. I'm not a CEO, not because I'm not one day to day, because I don't like that title. I don't like people calling me a CEO, so I haven't given myself that title, right? And so we're trying to create that culture of vulnerability, transparency. We talk about what's going on in the business, good or bad, and people appreciate that. So I've learned that. I've learned how important that is, but I don't exercise that in my private life.
That is interesting for me to hear. I identify with it probably more than I thought I would. Because you're right. I always say that this is my personal manifesto. The secret from where you are and where you want to get, there's two things that you have to master. One is you have to have a huge view of yourself. If you see yourself as large, you're already on your way there. But the second part is how you sell it to people. If you can't sell anyone else that you're as big as you think you are, game over. Yeah. Because it takes people to help you get there. Yeah. Right? For Caesar to be Caesar, people had to elect him. Yeah. For the king to be the king, there needs to be you got to sell it to them. You have to sell people, hey, it helps you if you let me get over. Yeah. Like wrestling. So if you can't sell it, no way. And if you don't see it, no way. So two very huge things. Yeah. When selling your story to people, you got to be vulnerable. You have to. Yeah. That's the vision. That's the joy. But again, I go back. It could be my own personal view of how to be an operator. You can find any person across the street to find problems, which is helpful. It's always good to have a red team. but leading requires optimism.
Yeah.
It requires optimism, almost thinking on your feet.
Yeah.
Immediate optimism.
Yeah.
But then what do you do with that? Because let's say you're with your team. Hey, don't worry about it. You digest something, a big blow, huge body blow, haymaker of a thing. Didn't see it coming. It's happened to me a couple of times. Tuesday, all right, well, this sucks, but don't worry about it. We're going to chew it with granite. We're going to spit it out. We're going to survive.
Yeah.
Okay. Team is good now. Team is going to go execute. You've done your job.
Yeah.
You're now back in your office.
Yeah.
What do you do? With the reality, because you sold it, you did your job to your team, but what do you do with the real emotions that you're feeling?
I ball them up real tight, and I hope they don't come off in the wrong spot. I don't know. I haven't given myself the permission to pause and have those moments of reflection yet, because and I'm not saying this is right, and I'm not making excuses, but I've just been too busy running, it feels like.
Yeah.
If just too busy running. And I feel like the time will come for that reflection. There'll be a trigger point for it.
Yeah.
Without me having to sign up for a yoga retreat and force it in a contrived way.
Yep.
A trigger will come where that reflection will happen. And unfortunately for me, I feel like it's going to be a tragic trigger, right? The loss of somebody, one of those things that causes you to be like, all right, fuck it. I just got to take a step back and think about stuff now, right? But it hasn't right now. And I couldn't agree with anything that you said, because it does take a lot of energy to be eternally positive, to be able to sell a story, but not sell it in a way that's fake, because you actually do believe in it, right? And to fake it till you make it. All those things take a tremendous amount of energy. So that's where I focus my energy. I don't focus my energy on the self-care and self-reflection. Wow. And that's, like I said, I recognize that's not a good thing. And that's probably something that I need to work on a go-forward basis. So that's probably sort of an area of opportunity for me. But I feel like so far, at least, it hasn't been, the bottle up thing. I was somewhat kidding about that, because I don't feel like that, right? Like, I don't feel like I'm an emotional wreck waiting to explode. Yeah. I feel like I've been able to deal with it as I have.
Oh, it's because you're task-oriented, right? So you're compartmentalizing it, but it is somewhere.
It is somewhere. It's absolutely somewhere. But I also think there is, for all of us as humans, because that question, the way you framed that question was within a business context, right? Yeah. But the reality is, when you start peeling that onion back, it's not going to stop at business. There's so much else that's going on inside you that all these thoughts connect that you don't know where that's going to take you, right? And so it really is sort of a part of all ourselves, I think, to kind of take that time. And that's what I think, we've got a couple of younger people in the shop, and I come across young people all the time. And I think that's where, maybe as a function of the way they've been raised or whatever, I admire the way they think about mental health and self-care and the balance that they want to have in their life, right? Because I feel like I'm in some ways the last of that generation of, you got to get in the office first and leave last, and that's the way you succeed. Yep. The kids today don't have that mindset, and arguably that's a healthier mindset.
Arguably.
Yeah, arguably.
I'll go with arguably.
Yeah.
I mean, something that we work with that I thought worked good. I tell everybody it's baseball. So we don't have a clock. I don't check for people when they check in. Yeah. I don't check for people when they check out. Yeah. But here's what I do say, and I tell everybody, to a man, it's baseball. There will be long stretches of time where I don't need you. Yeah. The ball is not coming in your direction. Yeah. But when I need you, I better see the most athletic play I've ever seen. Yeah. Like playing shortstop. Yeah. And I can't control how many times the ball is going to come to you, whether it's going to be a lot in a week, not a lot in a week, but just understand that over the course of the year, it's going to balance itself out. Yeah. But we never have work-life balance conversations, if only because I just say generally, I don't need your work-life balance. I don't need you checked in and then checked out. I just need you on when I need you on. Yeah. That could, now, with respect, we try not to make it too late in the day or too early in the day. But I've seen where people have been responding to that. It's task-based, and when you get the ball, I need you, But in terms of that leadership component, that's not the execution of tasks. That is casting vision in spite of, right? That is making a plan to go after something, going after a business partner, acquiring additional investors. At the end of the day, you outlay your budget to your staff, and they're excited about the budget. Yeah. you do the work of making sure the budget is the budget. That's, so it's interesting for me to see that. I mean, it is, I'm actually surprised. You've actually caught me off guard because I assumed, at least for myself, I assumed that the family would have been that respite, that exhaust. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe in I'm going to get canceled for this. I do believe in the traditional sense that if I was married, I wouldn't tell hold on. If I was married, I wouldn't tell my wife if we were having money trouble, but I'd tell her if we were having money problems.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm going to make it, I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah.
If we're not going to make it, then I got to tell you because we're not going to make it. Something is about to change.
Right.
But if we're going to make it and I'm at 0, but we made it, I wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
From a monetary home life perspective. But I've never met a partner. I mean, I'm not married. I got pretty close ones. I've never met a partner who didn't want to really know what I did. Like they've all been like, I don't know if that's a modern woman thing or a new age woman thing. I don't know if you're white, but they've always been like, well, what do you like? I really want to know. I want to be here for you. Did you have a good day? Did you have a bad day? And not just the esoteric, yes, good, no bad, but like the details of, well, why was the day bad? Tell me about the thing and
yeah.
And I just assumed that, I don't know why. I just assumed that marriage was the relief of that. But I guess it's not.
And I'm sure it is for a lot of people. But what I'm saying is I found the right girl for me because I know you have to know yourself to be successfully married, right? Because you have to know yourself and you have to know who's going to make a good partner for you.
Right.
And I found the person that was the right partner for me. And let's be clear, my wife is not a shy, stand by her man type of woman. She's a professional. She's also a carpenter. That's not her job, but she's also a carpenter.
Yeah.
And she's something needs fixing around the house. She's the one that does it. So she's the boss from that perspective. So she's not like a shy, demure person by any means, but she also is secure enough to feel like when you got to tell me something, you'll tell me. I don't need to bust your chops about it.
Wow. Huh. You said Portuguese? No, I'm joking. So if you're sequencing out your business and the visions that you have, we're talking about sequencing, we're talking about entrepreneurship, we're talking about resilience, we're talking about the immigrant's journey, we're talking about new age, old age. We've talked about a lot of different things, but bringing it right back down to business and your visions as an entrepreneur, if we're going 5-10 years into the future, where do you see yourself as an operator? I won't even just say the business, yourself as an operator, and just connecting it to your daughters, where do you see society and how you feel your children will interact with that space 5-10 years into the future? Okay.
Yeah, I think from a business perspective, it's interesting. I met somebody recently whose title was, and a very successful individual, their title was Chief Vision Officer. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty cool title. I've never seen that one before. And it kind of telegraphs into the world a lot about you and what you're trying to achieve. And I've been in charge of, setting strategies and steering ships my entire career, but I've never been somebody to stand up in front of a room and say, I've got a vision and this is my vision, right? I've not because I don't, but I think it just, to me, I put things more in practical terms. And it's like, when you take the next step, then think about the next step. When you take the step after that, then take the next step. And I'm not suggesting that's the right way to do things. It's just my MO in terms of how I operate. So I've been, very fortunate in my relatively short entrepreneur journey where I've had, it's kind of like the tush push in football, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're the tip of the spear and then you got a lot of people behind you that are pushing you. So I've been fortunate in that the investors we've had in the business have been really great supportive people that are stacked behind you that are helping push you forward, right? As a person who's the operator in the business. And so my first task is making sure those people are rewarded for the trust that they've put in me and into the team. So that's the first thing I want to achieve. Then beyond that, I think when we look at it more holistically going forward, I appreciate, you always need to be humble in, you don't have to be, but it helps to be humble in life and have a different perspective, have a balanced perspective of where you are. So, even if the business is a resounding success, which it's on its way being, and I hope it will be, I don't consider myself to be successful because the way I take myself down a peg is to say all I've done is I've made the pivot from being sweat equity to being a capitalist now, where I now have my little capital pot that I can invest in something else. And when I've done that successfully once or twice, now I'm an investor, right? And once I've done that, now I've got maybe the experience and the wisdom to be a director on a board and actually have something to contribute beyond the operational, because I'm an operator now, right? And so I think to me, it's just this never ending journey of learning. And maybe to connect the thoughts to your question about kids, I would hope to pass that on to the kids as well. It sounds cliche, but it's like, you're never going to stop learning. And so just have humility about where you are, and don't let people get into your head, and don't drink your own Kool-Aid, because you're never going to stop learning, particularly, in your professional life or in your personal life.
That makes sense. I think those are wise words. Maz, this has been fantastic. You wouldn't believe it. We already made it to the end. Is there anything that you want to plug or promote before we let you go today?
You know what? I'm an insurance nerd, and I don't think I want to bore anybody that's listening with insurance stuff, but look me up on LinkedIn. If you want to connect, please do. I'm always happy to make new connections and grow the network.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. This has been another episode of Unlinear. If you like content like this, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to see more, I'm sure there'll be clicks all over the place for you to see more, and we'll catch you next time on Unlinear.